Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
What a save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rui Diaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle!
The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is champion!
This feels fucking awesome.
And Portland can't say shit!
Nice work on your little yacht thing.
Vega! Ooch of a gooch! All creatures great and small!
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder at Heart wrote a commentary that we didn't take Come seriously.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes on the Sounder at Heart podcast network. I am Jeremiah O'Shan. Joining me today to help talk about this upcoming Leagues Cup game, to kind of just talk about the state of the league a little bit, is Brian Dunseth. You know his voice very well. We've had him on the show a few times. I always appreciate his time. Dunny, welcome back to Nos Arietes.
Yeah, no, it's been a while. I'm glad to be back, man. You do a great job up there, and I always love our conversations in what are we calling it? The cafeteria, lunchroom, food area, right, where we end up just making fun of Max Bretos, Tio Max, for him doing something outrageous or trying to claim that he's created some drink or some new cookie in his mouth or something. But yeah, it's always good to see him, my man.
Yeah, it's always nice to have. I think I've come to really appreciate you and Max especially. And we may as well start here. I am reminded that you guys were on the call for the Cruz Azul 7-0 game. Yeah. I'll just start with this. It has to be kind of neat to know that there's a chance that your call will be on a Puskas Award nominee. Like that's cool, right?
Yeah, listen, it's amazing. It's been an amazing year personally. And to think about in that moment what that goal meant. I mean, because that goal was scored in the manner in which Pedro de la Vega hit it after an incredible ball from Alex Roldan, thinking about the trajectory of the flight of a ball that struck maybe 5 to 10 yards in the opponent's half, that then doesn't, again, touch the floor or touch the surface until it goes 60 yards, first time then hit far posts, that then hits the underside, hits the other side of the post, and then bounces out, and then finally touches the ground. I didn't even realize it in real time until I went back and watched it. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those moments where the goal is extraordinary. You kind of forget that Seattle's on the field pissed off because Cruz Azul's 3 or 4 minutes late coming off, and the amount of goals, and De La Vega scored an amazing goal, but you don't even think about that goal beforehand.
Right.
Because this goal was one of the best goals I've ever seen live. And I'm not trying to, overshoot the shot, but this was a phenomenal moment, which in my mind, when I see it happen, I become kind of this weird insecurity of like, don't ruin this call. Make sure you're matching Max, because he went off in the deep end, which I love. And so, yeah, it's incredible to think about that goal and just seeing the look on Pedro's face after he hits it. And then like, oh my God, dude, I really did that, because it's outlandish to even think about taking that ball first time, much less have the technical ability to actually do it. So yeah, a special moment in time. And I think Max and I are very aware that we get to be a part of something so extraordinary.
Yeah, it was really a extraordinary strike. And I think what got me about it is first of all, there's the audaciousness of I'm going to take this 50-yard ball and I'm just going to hit it first time. He doesn't overhit it. He just kind of calmly lets it fall. He hits it with the open part of his, and he sort of like lofts it over the goalkeeper. He doesn't, this is the guy who has sort of become known for kicking the shit out of the ball, for lack of a better term. Even his first goal is sort of like that, where he just blasts the ball off the post and in. And he's had a few goals like that this year where he just kicks the ball really hard, I like to say. And that was not what he did here. But just it's that perfect mix of, it's a really hard to repeat goal, but it's not so outlandish. It's not a fluke, it's not like hitting a 50-yarder where the goalkeeper's off his line, or, we see a lot of amazing goals that there is a flukishness to them. It's like you could, like, you're almost not even thinking that's realistic, but this is sort of that perfect little nugget where it's an impossible goal in a sense, but there is an element of it that is repeatable. It's a goal that a million players have tried to score in training or in their backyard or whatever.
Yep. That's it. It's one of those like fresh off the training ground types. It's like training's over. Oh, here comes this ball. Let me just have it. Let me have a go. Let me see if I'm good enough to actually try it. And he does it. And to do it in that run, I loved how Kevin Mier, the goalkeeper, kind of just looks back at him like, you mother, how dare you? Because he just, the idea of getting posterized, he just got posterized. So a brilliant moment in time. I also love the kind of the cutaway later, when Schmetz is on the sideline, he's just like, effing kid. Like when he's looking at Prek, and I was fortunate enough to play with Precky, and Precky was certainly technically gifted enough to do things like that as well. And Precky's like, hey, buddy, that guy, he does what I used to do, type stuff.
That's a good Precky. You practiced that a little bit. That's good.
Well, having gotten scalped by Precky so many different times as an opponent. And then, one time my favorite Precky story is, are we allowed to curse? Can I do Precky?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So Precky, I was playing with him in Miami, and I was on the left-hand side of a back three. Precky checks the ball. I bypass him, find the run. And Precky goes, hey, man, give me the fucking ball. And I was like, Precky, you weren't on. I was playing around. He's like, I fucking tell you, man, give me the fucking ball, man. And I was like, yeah, whatever, Precky. And then Ray Hudson's like, comes over. He's like, Brian, it's fucking Precky, man. Give him the fucking ball. I go, yeah, but the ball's on. He goes, Brian, you're Brian Dunseth. He's fucking Precky, man. Give him the fucking ball. And I was like, all right, fair enough. So I learned my lesson. I think I was like 24 at the time. But I love Prek, man. He's
Precky was 40 probably at the time.
Probably. Like Precky went up to, buddy, I need to go get the massage. I was like, okay, cool. You go get the massage.
Yeah, it's been fun having him around. We don't talk to him a lot, but whenever he does talk, he's always got something interesting to say, and he's always listening to fun to talk to him. But talking about Pedro, or actually let's stick on this call. Max also has a very memorable, your call I think is perfect in that you're literally talking to the viewer as if, hey, it's 7-0, it's 6-0 this game, you may have started to tune out.
Yeah.
Pay attention and come watch this before, while it's like literally you're saying, come back into the room and watch this replay, which I think is a great, like an underrated thing. Sometimes we just need to walk the viewers through what's going on here. But Max's call is just this sort of, this is from my interpretation of it is that he is just yelling things that are flooding into his brain. Like, Ooch
so,
Magooch,
Ooch
I think is, do you know what, is that a thing that he says? Is that, where did that come from?
No, I've heard him say it before in a broadcast. Because Max and I have like 300 games. I mean, I think sometimes people don't realize that it's so much fun to work with Max. I'm so lucky. He's one of my best friends, both in the broadcast booth and outside in real life. We spend so much time with one another. He actually did my very first game at Fox Soccer Channel back in 2006. And so we probably have 350 games together that we've called. And so Ucha Magooch is like, that's like as top tier, high level that he can possibly go, where he's at such a loss of words. And I know he's told me before what it really means and where he's pulling it from, but for the life of me, I can't remember right now. So that was as kind of atypical of a Max, like, holy shit type of goal that he can't say that on air. So yeah, I mean, we were all in that moment. And when he finished, that's what I was like, in my mind, I went back to when I started on radio calling Real Salt Lake games. I remember one of the local radio guys was like, be as descriptive as possible, because there's a guy drinking a beer, working on his car, or, there's somebody somewhere not paying attention, just walked into the kitchen. I was like, if you're in the other room, get on back in here because you have to see this goal. I just remember that was the first thing out of my mouth. And I was like, that's not really television, but like it worked. And so then, I tried to describe the audaciousness of a decision in a split second for a guy that should have taken the ball down with his chest. And instead he scored one of the best goals I've ever been a part of.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. And obviously it sort of was the cherry on top of a very impressive performance by the Sounders, that they were able to ride the momentum a bit into, they were the only team in the first phase of Leagues Cup to go undefeated, to win all 3 of their games. And they set themselves up pretty nicely, although there was a chance, kind of the funny way that Leagues Cup is set up, there was a chance that Tigres could have ended up with the number 4 seed. And if Tigres had the number 4 seed, I guess the Sounders would have had to play on the road. But as it was, they end up getting Puebla, who is easily the worst team on paper left in the tournament. They have been, I would say that, and I would put them below the Galaxy, because the Galaxy at least looked really good during Leagues Cup. And they, other than the Sounders game, they've had some decent performances recently. Puebla has been down bad. They basically one really good result in this one against New York City FC, when New York City FC rotated pretty heavily in their first game. And then they sort of got through the last 2 games. They ultimately beat Montreal in a shootout. But what's been your take on Puebla? They just fired their coach. They have a new coach. Is it Martin Bravo? Is that right? Am I getting that right?
La Rata. Yeah, the former Pumas. Yeah.
Who has a pretty good playing career, but almost no managerial career. He's been, I think, the U21 coach up until this season, maybe even last year a little bit. But I don't know what it seems like there's always a possibility of a new coach bounce. But other than that, I don't know that there's a lot to look at Puebla as like this is a game the Sounders should win.
Yeah, no, they're heavy favorites, and I agree with you. I think Puebla is the clear outlier in this conversation because they took advantage of an NYCFC team that was rotating and thinking that their rotation was good enough to beat Puebla, and they were stumped. Wilfred Nancy and company handled their business. What was it, a 3-1 win, I believe?
Yeah.
And then finally, if Joel Waterman doesn't have a rush of blood and is shown red card in like the 23rd minute, Montreal is cruising in that game. And so, they controlled their controllables and they get through to this knockout round. There's a weird thing here. To your point, a 38-year-old first-time manager who's been coaching the youth and the reserve team, he's going to motivate them. It's going to be a quick bounce. Pablo Guede, who was basically sacked or quit, but did the press conference.
Kind of weird. It
was a weird formula. They're in 17th position, back-to-back, Apertura, Clausura. They got stomped by Tigres 7-0. Then they lose to, was it San Luis at the weekend?
Yeah, San Luis. Yep.
I don't like, even going through their games, like I'm trying to catch up because I didn't call any of their matches. We were based out here on the West Coast between LAFC, Real Salt Lake, and Seattle. I'm trying to catch up in real time. Every single formation that I go through is different. Every starting 11 is effectively different, outside goalkeeper and back line. Emiliano Gomez had a couple goals. You had Marine with a goal and an assist. You had Lozano with a goal. I'm going through Y Scout and I'm trying to pick up tendencies and I can't. I mean, I really, really can't. So for Brian Smetzer, what he'll always say is, we worry about us. We respect the opponent. We're going to figure out what our shape needs to be. And in a weird way, I think there's a benefit from losing at Minnesota, not because, you want to lose and you're on this run coming out of, the FIFA Club World Cup, and there's a level of consistency and you're coming off a fantastic win against LA Galaxy. Minnesota is a weird outlier. I can't figure out how their grittiness is causing so many teams so many problems. It's so weird, and credit to Eric Ramsey and everything that they're doing. But I think almost that slap in the face is a wake-up call to be like, okay, guys, you did the business at LA Galaxy, whether it's Kent or it's Albert Rusnak or Joao Paulo or it's whoever, the return of Steph Fry in goal, all of these things, like, let's recalculate and understand what we're trying to do and what's necessary. Because these next couple of weeks, I think, is an extraordinary opportunity. You think about a trophy, you think about the opportunity to face Messi, potentially if they go through, you think about Concacaf Champions Cup, you think about FIFA Club World Cup. There's a lot of really big things with just a couple of games remaining. And the quickest, most reliable way to lift a trophy is coming through the League's Cup.
Absolutely. No, I think if anything, the Minnesota match to me highlighted is you never know what's going to happen in MLS. Yeah. These teams are all very evenly matched. The reality is that you're in a quarterfinal of this tournament. You have a very winnable quarterfinal game. And at that point, you're in the semis and you're one win away from CONCACAF Champions Cup qualification.
Yeah.
Either way. Right. And so to me, it makes sense. Like, it just underscored the opportunity that they have right now that's facing them. I think that I understand the criticisms of Leagues Cup as well as anyone. It's a new tournament. It's not exactly a fair tournament. I get all that, but these games have been entertaining. And that's, to me, what it comes down to is that from minute 1 to minute 90, these are entertaining games. And I've never doubted that the teams are equally motivated. Say what you will about Santos Laguna, say what you will about Club Tijuana in the 2 games after Cruz Azul, say what you want about Cruz Azul even. The first half of that game was extremely competitive, and Cruz Azul did not look like a team that was ready to play. I think they were, maybe at some point during that, they just had a tendency to, like, what do you want us to do here?
After that fourth goal, they quit on themselves. But no, listen, Jeremiah, I agree with you 100%. Before the first game, Brian Smetzer said something to us, and it was more of like, hey, a quick reminder, because we were talking about the value of this League's Cup and more like theoretical, bigger picture, 36,000 feet type of conversation. And he said, the one thing that I think people forget about us is that we've had so much competition with Liga MX squads. Whether you talk about Club America or you talk about Pumas, you talk about Cruz Azul, talk about Monterrey, you talk about Tigres. Who else did he point out in that conversation? Chivas de Guadalajara. He said, what people forget is I've utilized my starters and I've utilized my bench. And in this weird conversation between Leagues Cup and CONCACAF Champions Cup and CONCACAF Champions League, and all of these things going back, even the international friendlies, that guys like Obed Vargas have thrived because they've grown up in real time because of this competition. And similar to the conversation, how we think down the line, the FIFA Club World Cup is going to benefit this group of players and benefit the next generation beyond that. We have an understanding of how to compete against these teams. And we have a self-belief of how to and listen, he's like, we've had failures and successes, and we've lost players throughout the process. Speaking to Paul Arriola down on the road against Cruz Azul, but in the midst of this, there's been benefits that we didn't realize in real time that would come down the line, and I think that's a byproduct of the group stage. And I think it's one of the reasons why Schmetz has always taken things like this really, really seriously, while contemplating substitutions and injuries, return from injuries and all of that, that there's not a lot of wiggle room. And we've heard from plenty of coaches that, hey man, the moment that we kind of stumbled, we knew how difficult it was because of how unforgiving this format is. And I like it. I like that the format is unforgiving because there is jeopardy. And we, Max and I, as well as calling Seattle, we're calling Real Salt Lake and LAFC. and saw, like when LAFC rolled out that starting 11 against Tigres, nobody in the world thought that they were going to win 2-1 with the strength of the roster that Tigres had rolled out. So I'm a big fan of it. I know we get into the details and the grittiness of social media, and the pontification of people's opinions over other people's opinions. But I do like it. And yeah, I'm getting paid to be a part of these broadcasts, but man, I've seen some great games in those 6 games in 8 days that Max and I were on the roll a couple of weeks ago.
Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes Nos Arietes, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. We've been independent since August of 2023, but need your support to make sure it continues. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible by your continued support. Memberships start as low as $25 a year, which not only helps make podcasts like this one happen, but also gets you access to everything we produce. If you're able to support us at higher levels, starting at $75 a year, you gain access to a host of other perks, most notably entry into our members-only Discord, where the smartest, funniest, and most engaged commenters share their thoughts and ideas. To find out more, just visit sounderatheart.com and click the subscribe button in the top right corner. Thanks for listening.
Nos Arietes, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes, but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Hacks and Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Hacks and Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at hacksandferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code SOUNDERATHEART, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to hacksandferments.com, use the code SOUNDERATHEART at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Hacks and Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. Yeah, I since we're talking about it, I may as well ask where you come down on this new format, because I thought, I'm with you. I liked that the games felt like they had jeopardy. There, you could not, every drop point, you knew that could potentially be the difference between moving on and not moving on. I know there's some debate as to whether 4 teams from each league is enough, but I do think it strikes an interesting compromise of having jeopardy, having games mean something, and not turning this into, a month-long ordeal where you have to pause the whole season.
Yeah, and I think there was concern, and rightly so, about the teams that were knocked out early and what that was going to mean for the return to season play. And then you get into kind of the breakdowns of games in hand and all those other things that come into play. Could I see a world in which maybe they went to 8 teams instead of 4 teams, top 8 teams? I could. I still think there's complications in that. But again, I think they were really intelligent and thoughtful in the process of trying to figure this out. I could also see a world in which maybe there's a home game and then a road game in Mexico, and then back to a home game, something like that at some point. But again, I'm one of the believers that on the backside of COVID, I think there was room for, an opportunity to throw a lot of ish against the wall and see what stuck. And I do think, and I'll put some credit on Steve Cherundolo and LAFC, because, he brought up something that I thought was fascinating. He said, each and every time that we play a Liga MX team, we're looking at a different shape, a different identity, a different approach, a different philosophy. So tactically, as coaches, we're then taking this back to the drawing board and saying, hey, this is pretty interesting. How can we implement this? I can remember sitting with BJ Callahan in the studios when Botafogo beat PSG. And as he was watching it, he was literally furiously texting. And I was like, BJ, what are you doing? He's like, no, I'm sending this immediately to my coaching staff and being like, hey, let's cut this out, because I've never seen a team deal with PSG the way Botafogo dealt with them. And so it gets your mind working of like, okay, we're all kind of bitter and sour in some way, and we all kind of have our ways about the sanctity or the purity of the game. But in real time, there's something to be said that something maybe, in these lower levels of our psyche of like, how can we steal this? How can we adapt this? How can we use this? And I think that goes back to some of the things that Brian Smetzer said to us before that Cruz Azul game of how we are going to play Sounders football, how we're going to talk about our homegrown process, how we're going to talk about Wade Weber and Tacoma Defiance and the development there. And then how do we create these game models that are kind of seamlessly ebbing and flowing into the first team. And that's why, Max and I are so complimentary that everything that's happening, and it's a byproduct of having so many Sounders games over the last couple of years, that now we understand kind of the nuance and the conversation of what's being built there, and why I think we're so complimentary of everything that's happening in the kind of Seattle Sounders folklore of real time.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can say at the very least that MLS is better off by being involved in international competitions.
Agreed.
And playing more international opponents is good. I think it just raises the level. I think it does. There's an element of it keeps everyone honest. And because the worst thing I think you can do is think you're getting better in a vacuum. And then as soon as you get outside of that ecosystem, you realize that you're not doing so well. But I agree with you also that the Sounders, I think the thing I found most impressive about their group stage performance, phase one performance, was the depth that they showed off, where, they're missing a bunch of guys, they're missing Jordan Morris. They lost Albert Rusnak. They were missing Stephen Fry, obviously Paul Arriola, João Paulo. You can kind of go down this list of players who are out or were out during the club during the phase one. And the Sounders still rotated their lineups, even it wasn't like they just relied on the same guys every game, but they also got production out of a lot of players. I want to say 13 players had a goal or an assist in phase one. That's remarkable stuff.
Yeah, no, it is. And listen, I can't imagine a world in which Craig Weibel and Brian Smetzer are predicting that, Danny Masovsky is going to be either your leading goal scorer or one of your leading goal scorers at the start of the season, that Ryan Kent is a name that's ever going to be legitimately talked about, Reed Baker-Whiting, Danny Leyva, Snyder Burnell, Kosa Rienzi, all of these guys are going to have opportunities to maybe mimic important roles that we saw Paul Rothrock walk into last year, that Georgie Manungo, that you want to continue to see his development of being not an outlier, but a guy that's an impact starter and player in that rotation. I think we all kind of hope that Jesus Ferreira would have the role that he's seemingly starting to walk into at this point, but he's still one of those weird, how do we identify him the right way type of players. And yeah, listen, I think it's competition for spots and it's depth for roster. And I think in a weird way, as important as these moments are from a branding perspective, so was the FIFA Club World Cup, as important as it was for LAFC and as important as it was for Inter Miami to continue to plant the flag on more of an international stage. Because, let's be honest, the investment in this team hasn't looked like the investment that it was for Obafemi Martins and Clint Dempsey and the transfer from, Raul and Nico. They've had to do it differently, and that's acquisitions of different teams. It's the, exquisite spend that we've seen on the training facility. So it's been leaner times than most. And maybe we look at a world where, and I see this at Salt Lake City, at Real Salt Lake, where the transition of power and ownership has included 4 different billion-dollar investors. I never had that on my bingo card to see $1 billion investor, being bought out by 2 different individual billion-dollar investors, and then one of them divesting of their investment to have another billion-dollar group come in. So maybe that comes in with the recent news that Vancouver ownership is no longer interested in selling, that they're looking for investment. I think that's a byproduct of the slowing down of expansion. This is my own theoretical, philosophical rant. But seeing multi-billion-dollar investors coming in and that then offsetting what the extraordinary nuclear arms spend is for the cost. And I think that's a real big byproduct of David Beckham, Jorge Mas, Inter Miami, looking to spend extraordinary sums, pushing the thresholds, and the high tides raising all ships. So yeah, it's from a bigger macro kind of perspective, what Seattle's doing in real time really is incredible, considering quote unquote the lack of spend and the way Craig Weibel has utilized all the mechanisms that we see in roster complicity.
Yeah, it is interesting. And it's sort of one of the things where, on one hand, I look at this as someone who follows this team closely, who knows how they used to operate, and here's the chatter from inside the club. There is some frustration over a sense that they don't have the transfer budget that they used to. And yet you look at the roster and you go, okay, so we have this U22 mechanism. We can spend some money there. Do we really think we can get a U20? Like, it raises the bar for what kind of play. Like, I respect that they don't want to just bring someone in to shut people up and say, look, we spent some money. Like there is this, and I think there's also some pressure for them to do that. There is some pressure for them to just get us someone so that we don't have to hear about how we didn't make any moves this summer. Like, just let us be Sporting Kansas City, for lack of a better term. Just bring someone in, and we can get off that list, and then we can kind of regather. But on the other hand, I get it. Like, look, if you're not going to improve on Osaze De Rosario, why are you going to bring in another forward? If you're not going to improve on Georgie Manungu, why are you going to bring in another winger? If you're not going to improve on Reed Baker Whiting or Snyder Brunell, why are we going to bring in another, fullback or central midfielder? And so you're raising the bar for what you need to find. And that doesn't mean those players aren't out there, but it does make it a little bit more challenging to fit them in your budget and do all these other things. And I don't know.
Can I add to that really quick? I think it's important because I've known Craig Weibel a long, long time, from our playing days when I covered Pac-12, when he was assistant at UW, to his time out here in Salt Lake when he transitioned from an assistant coach to general manager. And he and I have spent a lot of time together. And the one thing I can say, and I know you know this, but we do this thing as fandoms, and our tribalism, really wants us to go out and compete with the best. On the international market as well, the difficulty, and I know there's one big non-negotiable with Craig Weibel, and that's character, test of character. Because I can promise you, Seattle Sounders could go out and spend money, and they have, and they've hit on a bunch of them, and their strike rate is really, really high, and they haven't missed on many. And you don't want to go out and spend the money on, say, a Leo Chu. You want to find a Pedro de la Vega. But none of us were really sure what Pedro de la Vega was because of the injuries last year. Now we get a better idea of who he is now, right? So, and by the way, that's not a shot at Leo Chu and who he is as a person or anything. It just didn't work out.
No, I hear you.
The one thing with Craig is, on an international market, he refuses to be played. And if you're an agent or if you're a player, and at the very end of the negotiations, it's like when you're dating somebody for the very first time, and like 6 months in, that partner says something, you're like, oh, wait, what? You're not who I thought you were. That striking moment. If there's any part in the negotiation with Weibel where he feels like the strength of character would not be ideal for this group, he's going to walk away. At the same time, understanding that international windows don't line up, there's moments where the club's going to be like every other club in MLS. And we saw this with Chris Albright last year at FC Cincinnati, talk about we couldn't close deals because agents understood that they could take our offer and play it against another offer because the window was still going to be open. It was going to be beneficial for them. So there's so much nuance to the conversation, to your point, of how do we find somebody? And in the midst of this, how do we not create a glass ceiling for some of these young and up and coming players? Because I think you guys, I think Seattle does it the best with this theoretical approach of, hey, we're trying to develop. How many teams out there saying we're a development team? And you're like, no, bro, you're not, because your coach doesn't play these kids. Give credit to Schmetz and company, because when the kid's ready to play, the kid's ready to play, and he's going to give them an opportunity with the first team.
Yeah, you just look at the number of players. I think half the roster at this point has come through either directly from Defiance or from the academy.
Yeah.
And I assume that's probably the highest in the league, but it's not just guys filling out the bottom of the end of the roster. It's a lot of, it's starters. It's guys that are rotational players. It's up and down. There are some guys at the bottom of every team has guys at the bottom of the roster that don't play a ton, but the Sounders just don't have a lot of those guys. They have almost everyone on this team has a role to play and is doing something. And it'll, and I go back to like the Minnesota game where they did rotate a little bit, and they, sometimes it doesn't work out, but I think the game plan against Minnesota was solid. They, they dominated. I don't think Minnesota went into that game thinking, look, if we can get 30% possession and get lucky on a set piece, that'll work for us. Yeah. I mean, you'll take the result, but I don't think that's not a roadmap to long-term success.
They're different than like a Mikey Varas in San Diego, who we thought that was going to, suffer through the summer months, and they're absolutely flying. Same
with the schedule that lines up very, very nicely for them.
Yeah. It's going to be a huge, and then, I think it's not this upcoming weekend, but the next weekend they're on the road at LAFC. Can't wait to see how they set up to play against LAFC.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, listen, I mean this with the utmost confidence and respect for Eric Ramsey and Minnesota United. They're not visually pleasing. Their grit and determination, transition moments, and keep the game in front of you, kick the shit out of you. Look for manufacture moments. But Eric also, he's smart enough to recognize what he doesn't have and how can I accentuate the positives. And his tactical shape is built on what he doesn't have and what he does have. And he's I mean, the way that they grind out results, it's mystifying.
It is. I mean, this was a great example. Like the first game between the Sounders and Minnesota, I thought was kind of, that's how they want to play. Yeah. They got into transition. They got some set pieces. It was how they wanted it. This game, I'm rewatching the game before we got on the call here. And I'm just in the whole game, the announcers are talking about, oh, Seattle really is controlling this game. They're getting the better chances. I don't see, Minnesota's really just looking for a set piece here. And lo and behold, and it wasn't even like a well-taken set piece. That's what kills me.
It's a dangerous ball. And Steph comes off his line. He's kind of caught in between. Yeah. He's kind of reacting. It's almost like he's trying to stay big, but being able to react if there's a deflection. And when, it doesn't, like a double deflection doesn't happen, then he's stuck. I remember saying to Max, we were watching, we had the game up at the same time. And I was like, ooh, he's going to want that one back. That's one of those. But again, it just,
I don't know if he saw it either. I'm not 100% sure he saw where the ball was.
I agree. And I think it's one of those moments where it's like one goal changes everything, right? Mm-hmm. Like watching at the weekend, West Ham at Sunderland, if Bowen gets that goal in the 3rd minute, all of a sudden it's a completely different game. So yeah, manufacturing moments and these and that's where, this on Wednesday, Seattle's got to figure out a way to, visually be dominant. And how do you do that? It's obviously matching the intensity of the game that's necessary, sending some messages physically, getting stuck in, trying to see if you can crush the confidence of Puebla, who is most certainly crushed. They're going to be looked for, they're going to try to apply themselves individually. Who's going to try to outperform the collective? And then ultimately punish the mistakes. And I think those are always kind of the data points for me that I'm looking for, because it is an odd pressure for Seattle to recognize that they are going to 100% be looked at as the team that's going to go through and face the winner out of LA Galaxy and Pachuca, in that next round.
Yeah. In looking at Puebla, they also have some interesting stuff. Like they possess the ball a ton, at least under their former coach. They like to have the ball, and they usually play out of a 3 center back formation. But that 3 center, like you said earlier in the show, that 3 center back formation can take a variety of different looks. Sometimes it's narrow, sometimes it's more wide.
Yeah.
And so I don't really know what to expect from Puebla. but they, this is a game where they probably are looking at this as this is kind of, even though it's early in the season, this is kind of their best shot probably
100%.
at winning something. And so I'm sure they're going to put everything into it. Looking more broadly, who do you see as the favorites in this tournament at this point?
I would say whoever comes out at Tigres Inter Miami is the favorites for me. Just because I respect, and again, I'm coming from a defensive standpoint from my career. I respect goalkeepers and defensive shape and identity, but there's something about teams that can just flat out score more goals than their opponents. Kind of the old Bruce Arena theory. Every time Bruce would, hey Bruce, what are you doing? Well, we're scoring more goals than our opponents, and he'd just start chuckling with his shoulders. And that's what I just think they are the power. Toluca Orlando, that's going to be fascinating to see who comes out of that one. But I would say the easier of the four teams, the lesser of the evils of the four teams is going to be Seattle, Puebla, LA Galaxy, Pachuca, because we recognize that Pachuca can get smashed, as we saw against LAFC. Can't figure out LA Galaxy. Nobody can at this point. And yet, similar to Puebla, they'll be looking at this as the opportunity to get something out of a season that has been nothing more than a complete disaster.
Yeah, it's I for sure think the Sounders are getting the just desserts of being the top seed. They have the easier side of the bracket for sure. It seems like you would hope, if you're a Sounders fan, that there's going to be some attrition going on the other side of the bracket.
Yeah,
and I mean, I don't know. I think I do like the Sounders' chances in this. I think they are a good, they have honestly, if they can get to a final, that's great.
Well, especially after the teams that they drew in the FIFA Club World Cup. I mean,
God.
Drawing PSG and Atletico Madrid and Botafogo. I remember Maxi and I, because I was calling it and Max was going to be involved in the broadcast as well. I was like, man, Bri, he's like, could we have gotten a more difficult draw? And, Maxi and I were like, no, man, there's points in there somewhere. And Brian was like, listen, this is amazing. Like an opportunity to play these clubs.
Yeah.
I think everyone's stock starts to rise. Obed's stock certainly rose. And it's a great, to your point earlier, I remember you said it's a great understanding of like who you aren't, like how much more you need to climb. And so, maybe this is the backside of the FIFA Club World Cup, thinking to yourself, how are we going to get anything out of this versus like, hey man, we've got a pretty clear, definitive, chance and path to the final. So let's take advantage of this.
Yeah. And I do think that there's been a real bounce in terms of confidence and sort of self-belief and knowing that, look, if we can play with PSG, we should be able to wipe the floor with Puebla, kind of that sort of mentality. And hopefully that serves them well. Well, Dunny, I've taken enough of your time. I really appreciate it. You're going to be on the call for Sounders Puebla.
Yep. We got a couple see you again. I got to look at
see you a lot this year.
Yeah, we've been. I think we're coming up. Oh, we've got Seattle RSL in 2.5 weeks' time as well. So I always love coming up. I love seeing the crew. I love hanging out in the lunchroom with you guys. I love when we go up and get our coffee. I always say to the young lady that's serving the Starbucks and busting Max's chops, I was like, we got a big tipper here, big tipper. So just ruining it for Max where he's got to drop a tenner in the cup. No, I love being up there and seeing everybody. And it's always fun seeing Danny and everyone on the broadcast. And obviously with Craig Weibel, getting to give him a big old bear cut, even though half the time he's playing pinball somewhere in the Seattle area. So,
right. He's out at Shorty's pregame.
That's what he always tells me. Yeah. I was like, how'd it go? He's like, fingers are sore. Been killing it. I was like, you are a weirdo and I love every second of it.
Well, thank you for doing this, Brian. This is No Sadietes, part of the Sounder Heart Podcast Network. I am Jeremiah O'Shan, signing off for Brian Dunseth. We will catch you next time.
I expect a LAFC who's motivated to prove themselves at home, to prove to their fans that they're capable of winning in this league. And it's up to us to really brew in the party.
I feel a lot better than Bob.